Novelizers. Dark Night. Chapter 2. Good-Natured Ribbing. Novelized by A.D. Miles. Narrated by Rob Delaney.
Christ, how pathetic, Ramirez thought to herself as she watched her boss, Detective Wirtz, pick the crumbs of a fragged-out Nature Valley bar out of the belly folds of his shirt. Wirtz gave her the ick in the Wirtz way, but she knew that his heart was only 2 or 3 cigarettes away from the last arrest he'd ever experienced, an arrest of the cardiac variety. And as soon as that happened, she'd finally be promoted to head of the department and could start getting things done. But until then, she'd continue bringing Detective Wirtz his coffee and making small talk about the perennial topic of the day: Batman's somewhat theatrical harassment of small-time crooks, common burglars, and hubcap thieves. Like, what was it with that dude? She sort of gets the body armor and the cool car that looks like a rubber-toothed walrus, and maybe she could forgive the cape since it probably made him invisible or something. But what was with the little pointy ears on the top of his head? Like he'd clearly invested a ton of money in some next-level tech, every part of his whole getup serving some practical purpose. But then, right when he was ready to hit the streets for the first time, he was like, "Wait, it's missing something. Little decorative ears that are both pointy and pointless." It made no sense.
Of course, neither did a bat signal that took a crane and a flatbed truck to move around. Like, by the time you hoisted that gigantic beacon into place and fired it up, whatever crime you were trying to alert Batman about would be over. It must be a male ego thing. The need to spooge your logo all over the city while you kung-fu'd stumble-drunk drug addicts in back alleys and swooped snatched purses back to their owners. Of course, Ramirez kept this all to herself. She knew the game. She was a detective in the Major Crimes Unit, and if she wanted to outlive Wirtz, she had to show she could hang. That meant bringing him his coffee while breaking his balls with a little good-natured ribbing, the way all cops do. She nodded at the TV blaring above Wirtz's desk, where some Farmer Ted-looking nerd was interviewing the mayor about Gotham's bat problem. "You hear that? Mayor says he got the Batman in your sights," Ramirez teased. Wirtz picked a large chunk of granola out of the wet woolen cave of his belly button and popped it into his mouth. "I bet I find that guy way before you find any guy, you satchel-assed old maid." Jesus, Ramirez flinched, more from the blast of 4 Roses vapor coming from Wirtz's breath than the clumsy insult. But also, like, what the hell? She was only 30. And relationships seemed like a drag. Another dude getting all bent out of shape every 3 seconds because she didn't want to listen to his latest passive income scheme or some shit. Oh, thanks. She watched Wirtz wad up a blank piece of paper and hurl it at some insane collage he'd put together on his bulletin board. A grainy photo of Bigfoot, a picture of Elvis, and an image of Abraham Lincoln. What the fuck was this supposed to be? Did he think one of them was the Batman? Was he equally obsessed with finding those characters as well as the Batman? Wirtz softly farted and began to snore. She just shook her head. With any luck, he'd pass away in his sleep and there'd be one less scrote between her and running the entire department. Speaking of old scrotes, Ramirez figured she should probably go kiss the ring of Lieutenant Gordon, and she knew just where to find him. Standing next to the bat signal up on the roof. You know, in case Batman needs to know where the fucking police department is. Gordon was always on the roof mooning over the bat signal, pining really, desperate for a visit from his body-suited bro friend. And sure enough, as soon as she stepped out of the bulkhead, she saw him, peering into the darkness, his hair tousled by the breeze as if Gotham herself were trying to match his sighs of longing. Ramirez mustered up a little expositional small talk. "Ever plan on seeing your wife again, Lieutenant?" Gordon wheeled around. "Do you ever plan on seeing your terminally ill mother in the hospital before she croaks, Detective?" For fuck's sake, thought Ramirez. What is it with these old white dudes and their 0 to 100 escalation of good-natured ribbing? They're so fragile. She changed the subject. "So he hasn't shown up?" "No," said Gordon, "and I've bat-signaled him twice. I don't want to seem desperate, but maybe he just didn't see the first one. What do you think? Should I signal him again? I mean, if he wanted to see me, he'd come, right?" "God, I'm so lame." Gordon turned his attention to the bat signal itself, fiddling with one of the knobs, hoping in vain that maybe if he just turned up the brightness a bit, Batman would see it. But what Gordon couldn't have known was that Batman would not have seen the signal no matter how bright it was, because at that exact moment, he was in a parking garage chasing after his own obsession, a meeting of small-time thugs with various foreign accents. A white panel van had just barreled into the garage, followed by several black SUVs, like a herd of Uber blacks closing in on a wounded Amazon delivery driver. The vehicles came to rest and disgorged their respective breeds of thugs. The white van thugs had sour expressions belying tough, violent childhoods with little to no hugging, while the SUV thug was a ponytailed bossy type who spoke loudly as if he were speaking to a much larger crowd. Ponytail opened the back of his SUV and, surprising no one, revealed a pack of drooling attack dogs that he might as well have stolen from the estate of Montgomery Burns. Meanwhile, a drug dealer with a bag over his head dick-swinged out of his SUV, and he and Ponytail began outlining their beef through braggadocious blurts of swagger. "Your drugs are ruining my customers' lives," Ponytail complained. "I need them addicted, but functional enough to still hold down jobs so they can buy more drugs." "Ha!" cackled Baghead unsympathetically. "Sometimes what fucks you up can also bring you down." It was not a bad point in the general sense, but it didn't directly address Ponytail's complaint. Suddenly, in a development that could only be described as a first draft relic, a set piece of copycat Batmen began flitting around the shadows of the parking garage. Wearing what appeared to be black trash bags and worn-out rain boots, these new Batmen looked like they just crawled out of the picked-over bargain bin of a Halloween pop-up store. Their plan had been to surround the thugs and then simultaneously reveal themselves in sort of a typical Batmanian flourish, but the goddamn attack dogs had begun barking the second they heard the rustle of cheap costume plastic, forcing these erstwhile Batmen to engage much sooner than planned. This led to the premature brandishing of their Bat Blasters, which upon closer inspection were just cheap Walmart shotguns spray-painted with black Rust-Oleum. A shot rang out, and things had gotten very real very fast. In what must have seemed like a relief to our cosplay Batman, the real Batman used the gunshot as his cue to come crashing through the wall of the parking garage. This not only stole focus from everyone else involved, but also indicated that Batman has a certain hierarchy of concerns, and property damage to innocent business owners ranks far below small-time thug thwarting. As Batman started dance-fighting his way into the fray, the various thugs patiently waited their turn to step forward and get their ass kicked. After systematically neutralizing one after the other, the remaining thugs piled into a panel van to escape, motivated by either self-preservation or boredom. But by this point, Batman was very horny for thug meat, and so he whipped out his barbed metal prong and mounted the fleeing van. But before he could finish, he was knocked off the van by the invincible girth of a concrete column, and he rolled to the ground, his body throbbing in exquisite pain. That's when he executed his undeniable closer, a pirouette over the railing of the parking garage's downward exit spiral, landing on top of the van, denting the roof, and thereby making the vehicle completely undrivable. As the thugs whimpered beneath Batman's quivering satisfaction, one of them looked up at him, and, in a Sharks vs. Jets accent that demonstrated both street smarts and street stupidity, he said, "How come yous get to be the Batman and we don't?" "Because I'm not wearing black yoga pants," Batman snapped back in a performative whisper growl that petered out towards the end. One definitely got the sense that Batman wasn't exactly confident in the vocal choice he'd made when he first started honing his batness. He was just trying things out when he used it while subduing a couple of looters carrying mini Bose speakers out of a Black Friday sale. And since they'd already heard it, he figured he had to stick with it. "Like Mel Tillis Stammer," he remembers Alfred saying. "It's nothing like that," Batman wheezed as menacingly as possible. But yeah, he thought to himself, it was kind of like the Mel Tillis Stammer, an attention-seeking gimmick that eventually becomes a millstone around a performer's neck. Of course, none of this foolishness would have surprised Ramirez, who was currently watching Gordon bound up the steps of this bank that had just been robbed. Gordon so clearly loved ducking under the police tape as he entered a crime scene. He flashed his badge to literally no one and jogged over to Ramirez. She showed him an 8x10 glossy of the Joker, criminal mastermind who'd perpetrated the bank robbery while also pushing his primal wound expressed as criminal clown vibe. Gordon glanced at the photo. "I wonder what he's hiding under all the face paint," he wondered on the nosely. Gordon then turned and skipped up a second set of stairs to the bank in such a jaunty fashion that he was practically floating. It was a gleeful enthusiasm that Ramirez found confusing until she joined Gordon in the bank vault. Of course, Batman was there. Give us the room, please," Gordon blurted out greedily, a goofy smile percolating across his lips. "Whatever," muttered Ramirez as she exited the vault. Enjoy broke Bat Mountain. Inside the vault, Batman pondered the photo of the Joker as Gordon peppered him with intel. "The rest of the gang were just a bunch of local petty crime types," he said, his tone implying that there was more where that came from. Much more. But the Batman either didn't notice or actively ignored Gordon's flirtatious teasing out the details of the crime report. Batman just waved his Bat Geiger counter over the stack of bills and croaked, "These the marked bills I gave you?" "Oh, yes," Gordon blurted. "We used all of them. I made sure of it. I was like, hey, Batman gave us these marked bills to use, and you bet your ass we're using them. That's a given. So, yeah." It was then that Batman noticed something. A clue, perhaps. He held up a stack of bills and chafed out an announcement. "I think we've got a winner." But Gordon, who was across the room and under an air conditioning vent, misheard Batman's hushed suggestion as, "I think we should grab some dinner." Gordon closed his eyes in an effort to settle his voice, measuring out his response. "I mean, I just ate, but I could have a drink or whatever while you got something. Or I could just have a second dinner. Why not?" Gordon winced at how cringe he sounded. He opened his eyes slowly, sure that Batman would be looking at him like WTF. But Batman had in fact Irished out during Gordon's clumsy little speech. He was gone. Vanished into the dark night. Night, not Knight.